Hey guys, how's it going? Avishai here with another episode of What Israel Is. Yesterday was an event of note. We had the Jerusalem March for Pride and Tolerance. It is one of two annual gay pride marches, parades, with the more famous one being the Tel Aviv Gay Pride Parade, which is a kind of a populistic thong fest, and but the Jerusalem March is something different. It is a more conservative event. It's more about a political statement and less about celebrating, a gay pride. It is more about head count and demanding change than it is about hot bodies and having fun. This particular march also marked an anniversary. Last year, during the March for Pride and Tolerance in Jerusalem, an Orthodox man brandishing a knife assaulted the marchers, injuring several and killing a 16-year-old girl who was a heterosexual who was just there to show support. This person is obviously jailed and has been sentenced, I think. He's been given life. Even from within the jail, he attempted to coerce his brother to disrupt. That's such a not disrupt, to kill people marching. Obviously he failed. The brother was arrested. He claims to be in complete disagreement with his brother, as was the murderer of last year, who was arrested from within prison. Should also be noted that a decade ago, the self-same murderer had stabbed a man during the self-same march, and he was jailed and then released a decade afterwards, and maybe I think it was a couple of weeks afterwards that the march took place, and he grabbed his knife and went at it again. And, well, there is something to say about the ineptitude of these parades. I don't feel that, institutionalized events such as these necessarily make an actual impact. It's not real protest. Real protest is gays and their, I dislike the word allies, the people who support them, blocking entrance to synagogues, or blocking entrance to the chief rabbinate. That is protest. Protest is them going into police cars, bruised and with their hands handcuffed behind their backs. That's protest. Protest means risking something and you know, actually hurting people. It's maybe not nice to say it, but yeah, hurting people. This march in Jerusalem took place on the backdrop of several statements by rabbis about how homosexuals are perverts and anathema, and how nobody needs to see their perverted ways in the public. And actually also a statement by the mayor of Jerusalem, who claimed that he will pay a visit to the grave of the murdered girl, but will not march with the protesters because the parade, or march rather, is offensive to religious Jews in Jerusalem. It's not offensive enough. Not half offensive enough. If homosexuals want something within Israel to be moved, they have to start rocking the boat in a major way. And it's true of all minorities in Israel and everywhere. And I'm not necessarily talking about, you know, whatever's going in the United States. I'm not in the know enough about the whole Black Lives Matter movement. But what I'm seeing from it is more of the same, insofar as, you know, marching and parading. If gays here want state recognition, they have to wrest it from the hands of the orthodoxy, and while they're doing it, spit in their eyes. And, you know, it kind of all makes me think about how whenever we discuss the problems with Islam, some people claim that yes, the Old Testament is a horrible document, but uh, both Christianity and Judaism have somehow reformed from its brutal and barbaric base, and Islam hasn't. There is a truth to it, but it is partial. How so? So, yeah. This harkens back to a previous episode I did about Judaism and the various sects and evolutions of Judaism. So the first major reform within Judaism was very early on. The beginning of the first millennium, and essentially what we saw there was a shift from priestly to rabbinical Judaism. After the fall of the first temple, we had a shift from Judaism being the religion being conveyed by priests or kohanim, kohens, within temples, to Judaism being taught by rabbis within synagogues. And what a synagogue is essentially is a school, also called Bet Midrash, and that is why those of you who are familiar with Reform or conservative Jews might be familiar with the word shul, which is Yiddish for school, and refers to synagogue. And within the synagogue, a Jew would be taught the tenets of his faith. And if he were wise enough in the ways of the Torah, he could himself become a rabbi, a teacher, essentially, of Judaism. This shift is somewhat similar to the Protestant Reformation within Europe, where you have a shift in the authority of interpreting the scripture. So before the Protestant Reformation, for example, you have priests, again, being the sole people with authority of relaying what the scripture actually means, to even the point where they are the only people who actually understand the language in which it is written, and a layman can't even read it. Within so in the same way, within Judaism, we have this shift where, if you consider the Protestant Reform, there's this tenet of a man alone in front of the scripture. Basically meaning that the individual has some authority in interpreting the holy text. Both in Protestant Christianity and in Judaism, this is not entirely the case that he is the sole interpreter of the text, as there are people there who guide him in that. Pastors in Protestant congregations and rabbis in rabbinical Judaism. And the ways in which a Jew is free to interpret the text are also constrained by a codex of previous interpretations, which are agreed upon to a degree, but there is some freedom to dispute a former rabbi. But not ignore. So you can't really ignore previous things said by rabbis, but you can dispute them and maybe take a different perspective on a specific topic to them. And another thing that is different here is that the different Jewish congregations, the different synagogues, are not hierarchical. So there's no chief rabbi. There's no such thing as something like a bishop or a cardinal, anything of the sort within Judaism, or is there? And here we get to a point of going back to the Ottoman Empire. There was a system within the Ottoman Empire called the millet system. Most probably mispronouncing it, but I don't know Ottoman Turkish or any Turkish at all. But this system, the millet system, was a system which is considered to be both a system of religious pluralism, but also of religious segregation. And what it meant was that within Ottoman rule, places of Ottoman rule, there was some degree of autonomous rule by people of different faiths, and it was achieved by having chief representatives of the various faiths. And while Orthodox Christianity and Catholic Christianity had different representatives, there was a singular representative for Judaism, and there was no need for any other representatives, because in essence all Jews within Ottoman rule were Orthodox Jews. So Judaism did not need any more representatives at the time. How is this relevant to today? Because the millet system is still in place in Israel. It is one of the reasons, for example, why people of different faiths cannot marry within Israel. It is not illegal for them to be together or have even children or anything, but so long as both partners do not convert to each other's religion or whatever, they cannot marry. And it is the reason why the whole millet system is the reason why anything related to marriage and divorce is handled not by the state, but by the chief rabbinate, an institution that was essentially invented by the Ottoman Turks. There is no basis within Judaism for a pope-like figure or a patriarch-like figure. There is no basis for a chief rabbi. There are some instances of there being like, they're called exilarchs. So leaders of the Jews with in diaspora. But even so, it was more of an honorific, not really something that... They were people that were revered as first in the learning and wisest and whatever, but they had no absolute authority over other Jews. And the case within Israel is one of absolute religious authority by the chief rabbinate. So that's how we got here. And that's why, for example, that there is no civil marriage or anything of the sort within Israel, and gays cannot marry or adopt or anything of the sort within Israel, and have to find all sorts of loopholes by going abroad to marry or to adopt, etc. Things like that. And why, for example, if I were to marry my girlfriend within Israel, within what is recognized by the state as an official marriage, I will have to drag her grandmother to the chief rabbinate to prove that she is Jewish, because it happens to be that she came from the USSR, and the rabbinate does not automatically trust that Russian or Ukrainian or Belarusian or Moldovan Jews are in fact Jewish. That's as far as rabbinical Judaism is concerned. There was a second reform. Again, I discussed these changes within Judaism in a previous episode, but I feel like it is worth reiterating and maybe developing further. So, what we had in the 19th century is a movement within Judaism following the emancipation of Jews in Europe. So Jews were finally considered to be citizens of whatever country they lived in and had legal rights, and were allowed to own land, and their money was theirs, and not the crown's. They were free. And this brought a radical social change within the world of Judaism in Europe. And a lot of Jews were tempted to open up to the different cultures where they lived. And there was a movement of people who said that Judaism must change, must modernize. Some of them, for example, made claims that were religious, and said that, for example, the oral tradition within Judaism is an invention that has no basis in Scripture, and that lion's share of the Jewish halacha, the corpus of religious laws, is extrapolated from the oral tradition more than it is extrapolated from the Bible itself. And if it has no basis in Scripture, then it is irrelevant. And if or even not that it is irrelevant, but if rabbinical Judaism is not as pure as it claims to be, then there is no reason for Judaism to be as strict as it is to begin with. If it is not literal, a literal interpretation of what Judaism should be, then there should be a freedom to be Jewish in more than a single way. And that Judaism needs to change in this way because it has become stale. It was a promising turn of things. And following it were several different counter reforms. For example, the advent of conservative Judaism, which is conservative with respect to Reform Judaism. But the current state of things in Israel is such, or rather within the world is such, that the reform movements, the reformed sects, including for argument's sake, the conservative Judaism, are a majority only within the Americas. And anywhere else in the world are dwarfed by the Orthodox congregations. And this is most certainly the case in Israel, where the majority of Jews are Orthodox or Orthodox leaning. And there was this quote which I gave in a previous episode about how a secular thinker said that I don't frequent a synagogue, but the synagogue I don't frequent is an Orthodox one. So is Judaism reformed? Reformed only in the sense that we don't stone people, yeah. Next episode, I'll be discussing a pet theory of mine about why it hasn't reformed as much as we'd like, why Islam hasn't reformed, and what the hell does Judeo-Christian even mean? Until then, have an awesome weekend, and see you guys soon.